You spend your entire life building walls. You convince yourself that if you just care a little less, if you stay quiet when they misunderstand you, if you smile when you actually want to scream, you'll finally be safe. You call it maturity. You call it being the bigger person. But let's be brutally honest for a second. You're not safe. You're exhausted. You're exhausted because pretending that nothing hurts is the heaviest burden a human being can carry. I spent years doing exactly that. I thought emotional armor was the ultimate goal. If nobody could reach me, nobody could break me. It cost me my peace, my sleep, and eventually it cost me the very relationships I was desperately trying to protect. Because here is the harsh reality, the depth psychology, specifically the work of Carl Jung, exposes. Pain doesn't evaporate just because you refuse to look at it. It goes underground. It becomes anxiety that wakes you up at 3 a.m. It becomes a sudden anger over a spilled cup of coffee. It becomes the invisible puppeteer of your life. If you are tired of running, if you realize that your so-called armor is actually a prison, you are in the right place. Consider subscribing to this channel, hitting the bell, leaving a like, and dropping a comment below, sharing your own experience. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. We are building a community of people who choose truth over comfort. Now, let's dismantle this illusion of control. We're conditioned to believe that our suffering comes from the outside. The dismissive boss, the ungrateful child, the partner who walked away. We point our fingers at the world and demand it changes so we can finally feel okay. But Jung warned us about this trap. He understood that the external world only has the power to destroy you if it perfectly aligns with an unhealed wound inside your own mind. Think about it. Why does a specific insult crush you, while someone else can brush it off with a laugh? It's not the words. It is what those words awaken in your shadow. The shadow is everything you have rejected about yourself. It is the shame, the fear of not being enough, the desperate need for validation that you pushed into the basement of your psyche. We spend so much time curating an image of strength. We curate it for our families, our colleagues, our friends. We become terrified that if we drop the mask for even a fraction of a second, everything will collapse. But this constant vigilance is not strength. It is a state of chronic panic. You are living in survival mode, waiting for the next hit. Running from your own vulnerability does not make you bulletproof. It makes you a hostage. Carl Jung said that we are not what happens to us. We are what we choose to become. But you cannot choose what you become if you don't even know who you actually are. You only know the defensive character you created to survive your past. Let's dive into the mechanics of this illusion. The defensive character you play every single day is what Jung called the persona. It's the mask. It's the polite smile at the office, the "I'm fine, everything is great" text message you send while your chest feels completely hollow. But ask yourself, what happens to the parts of you that don't fit that perfect, socially acceptable mask? The raw anger you swallow to keep the peace, the grief you refuse to process because you have to be the strong one for your family, the deep, terrified part of you that just wants to be held and told you are enough. They do not vanish. They are shoved violently into a psychological basement. This is your shadow. And here's the terrifying truth about the human shadow. It doesn't just sit there quietly gathering dust. It operates like a neglected, starving animal. It demands to be fed. When you suppress your shadow, it takes the wheel. Carl Jung warned us explicitly, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You think it's fate that you keep attracting partners who abandon you. You think it's just a tragic coincidence that your boss always undermines your efforts. You believe you are simply a victim of a cruel, chaotic world. But look closer. It is your unintegrated shadow pulling the strings. You are unconsciously seeking out situations that validate your deepest, unhealed wounds. If you secretly harbor the belief that you are unworthy of love, your unconscious will literally hunt down people who treat you like you are worthless, just to prove itself right. It feels like a curse, but it is actually your own psychological machinery operating in the dark. Let's get painfully specific. Imagine someone makes a passing comment about your work or your lifestyle, a tiny, seemingly insignificant critique. Most people would shrug it off and move on with their day. But your heart starts racing, your vision narrows, you feel a sudden, violent surge of defensive rage or a crushing wave of worthlessness. Why? Because that comment didn't just hit your intellect, it hit a raw, bleeding nerve in your shadow. It triggered the exact feeling of inadequacy you felt decades ago, trying to get a parent's approval and failing. You aren't reacting to the present moment. You are reacting to a ghost from your past. This is exactly why trying to build thicker walls around yourself never works. It is the ultimate tragedy of the modern human condition. You are exhausting yourself, building a fortress to keep the enemy out, entirely blind to the fact that the enemy is already inside the gates. The pain you're running from is not external. The people who hurt you, the situations that break you, are very often simply holding up mirrors to the parts of yourself you refuse to accept. And this is where the profound, life-altering shift happens. The exact moment you stop pointing your finger at the external world and start looking directly into that mirror, you reclaim your power. You stop being a passive, helpless victim of circumstance. But make no mistake, this requires a terrifying level of honesty. It means looking at your own jealousy, your own capacity for manipulation, your own cowardice, and saying out loud, yes, this is also me. It sounds brutal. Why would anyone willingly look at their darkest, most shameful parts? Because the energy you spend repressing your shadow is the exact same energy you need to actually live. By keeping that basement door locked, you are draining your own life force. You feel chronically exhausted, not because you're physically tired, not because you need another cup of coffee or a vacation, but because holding down your shadow requires an immense, continuous psychological effort. You are literally fighting a war against yourself 24 hours a day. Since childhood, you were sold a toxic lie. You were taught that suffering is a glitch in the system, a glaring sign of weakness. You learned that if you are crying, if you are anxious, if you feel a crushing weight in your chest, you must be doing life wrong. So, what did you do? You ran. You numbed it. You distracted yourself with endless scrolling, toxic relationships, relentless busyness, and the exhausting pursuit of external validation. You built an entire lifestyle around avoiding a single moment of genuine, silent discomfort. But ignored pain does not die. It adapts. It digs tunnels deep inside your psyche and mutates into chronic anxiety. It becomes that sudden, explosive anger over a minor inconvenience. It turns into an overwhelming apathy where absolutely nothing excites you anymore. Carl Jung viewed suffering through a radically different lens. He didn't see it as a disease to be instantly cured, suppressed, or a weakness to be deeply ashamed of. He saw it as the ultimate messenger of the soul, the alarm bell of the unconscious. He famously noted that depression is like a lady in black. If she turns up, don't shoo her away. Invite her in, offer her a seat, treat her like a guest, and listen closely to what she has to say. But you don't listen. You slam the heavy door in her face. The reason you're in so much agony right now is not because the world is inherently cruel or because you're fundamentally broken. It is because you're in a violent state of internal civil war. There is a primal, authentic part of you that is screaming for growth, desperately wanting to evolve past your current limitations. And right across the battlefield is your fragile ego, terrified of losing control, desperately trying to keep everything exactly the same. That brutal friction between who you truly are and who you are terrified to become. That is precisely where your suffering is born. Transformation requires destruction. You cannot build a bulletproof mind on the rotten foundation of your unhealed trauma and fake personas, letting go of the desperate need to be liked, cutting ties with people who slowly drained your life force, allowing the carefully curated version of yourself to completely die. This is an internal grieving process. It is a death. It is going to hurt more than you can imagine. But it is a sacred kind of hurt. When your certainties crumble, when your carefully constructed mess shatters and you're left completely exposed in the ruins of your old life, you finally meet the only person who can save you, yourself. Pain is not a failure. It is the violent, absolutely necessary initiation into the journey of what Jung called individuation. Most people never cross that threshold. They peer into the abyss of their own minds, see the terrifying demands of individuation, and run straight back to the comfort of their masks. They choose the familiar ache of pretending over the sharp, agonizing burn of becoming real. But if you're still here, listening to this, you no longer have the luxury of ignorance. You have seen the strings attached to your own limbs, and you cannot unsee them. So, how do you actually cut those strings? How do you practically integrate a shadow that has spent decades in the dark? It starts with a radical shift in how you observe your own triggers. Let me give you a deeply practical framework. The next time someone dismisses you, criticizes you, or ignores a text message, and you feel that familiar, suffocating rush of panic or rage, stop. Do not lash out. Do not send the angry paragraph. Do not immediately distract yourself by scrolling to your phone. Sit entirely still with a burning sensation in your chest. That specific, uncomfortable physical reaction is not your present reality reacting to a late text. It is your unconscious mind screaming. Ask yourself the one question Carl Jung practically begged humanity to ask. What is this feeling protecting me from realizing about myself? Perhaps the explosive anger at being ignored is just a bodyguard for the terrifying belief that you are inherently unlovable. The moment you name it, the moment you look directly at that core wound and say, I see you, You are my fear of abandonment, and I am not going to hide from you anymore. The shadow loses its grip. You drag the monster out from the basement and into the sunlight. And monsters, historically, burn up in the light of consciousness. Consider the modern hustle culture that so many of us are drowning in. We work 80 hours a week, completely burning ourselves to the ground, and we call it ambition. We post our late-night grinds on social media to farm validation. But Jungian psychology forces us to look much closer at the underlying machinery. Is it really ambition, or is it a terrified child inside you, desperately trying to buy worthiness through productivity? Are you actually chasing success, or are you just exhausting yourself trying to outrun a deep-seated feeling of inadequacy? The exact moment you realize your entire lifestyle might just be a highly functional trauma response, the game fundamentally changes. You stop being a slave to external applause. You stop letting an arbitrary standard of success dictate your blood pressure. This process of stripping away the fake persona is not a beautiful, curated journey of self-love. It is messy. It is brutal. You will mourn the versions of yourself that you have to brutally kill off. You will lose people. Let me be unequivocally clear about this. As you stop people-pleasing, as you stop contorting yourself to fit into the comfortable little boxes others have built for you, some people will walk away. They will call you selfish. They will say you have changed. And they are absolutely right. You have changed. You're no longer the convenient, highly predictable emotional hostage they relied on. But this specific type of loneliness is not a punishment. It is a filter. The people who exit your life when you set a boundary were never actually attached to you. They were attached to your mask. The empty space they leave behind is exactly what you need to finally breathe. This is what Jung meant by becoming whole instead of becoming good. The world is obsessed with goodness, being polite, being agreeable, being the endless giver. But wholeness requires integrating your capacity for darkness, your firm boundaries, your absolute right to say an unapologetic no. A person who is merely good can be manipulated, broken, and completely exhausted by the demands of others. A person who is whole is an immovable object. Here is the final, uncomfortable reality of this entire process. Absolutely nothing will protect you from external suffering as long as you remain entirely blind to what is happening inside your own mind. You can isolate yourself. You can cut off everyone who disagrees with you. You can build the thickest, coldest emotional walls imaginable, but the careless words of a stranger will still cut you like a knife. A perceived rejection will still ruin your week. The losses will keep bringing you to your knees over and over again until you finally wake up. And let's demystify what awakening actually is. It is not sitting on a mountaintop achieving permanent bliss. It is a brutal, daily choice to look directly at your own internal chaos, especially when it hurts, and take absolute responsibility for it without blaming your childhood, your ex, or society. Carl Jung summarized the human tragedy in a single, devastating sentence. What you resist persists. You have spent decades resisting the deeply buried fear of not being enough. You have resisted the terrifying emptiness of loneliness. You have fought tooth and nail against the agony of feeling unseen. And what did all that resistance actually buy you? Exhaustion. You are completely drained from fighting a phantom war against the world, when the actual battlefield was always in your own unconscious. You tried to be perfect to avoid criticism. You tried to be numb to avoid heartbreak. It didn't work. It only made you more fragile. True emotional immunity is not hardness. It is absolute, unflinching clarity. It is understanding the exact architecture of your own wounds, because the moment you truly map out your triggers, your insecurities, and your darkest fears, the external world loses its leverage over you. When someone insults you, it no longer destroys your identity, because you already know exactly who you are, including your most shameful flaws. You still feel the sting of rejection, yes, but you do not drown in it. You suffer a loss, but you do not completely lose yourself. That is the fundamental difference between living defensively and living consciously. What truly shields you is not retreating from life. It is diving into it so deeply that the surface level turbulence can no longer capsize you. People who live on the psychological surface are thrown around by every single wave of criticism, every minor inconvenience, every shift in someone else's mood. But those who do the excruciating work of shadow integration know that beneath the chaotic waves, there is absolute, immovable silence and power. That is the exact place you need to operate from. When you anchor yourself in that profound self-awareness, the world can absolutely try to knock you down, but it will no longer find a hidden wound to hit. If this video shattered an illusion for you today, do not just click away and go back to sleep. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like to support this movement of truth. Drop a comment below saying, "I choose awareness," to publicly stake your claim on your own psychological freedom. Share this exact video with someone you know who is still exhausted from carrying their emotional armor. The journey does not end here. We will continue to dive into these dark, necessary waters in the next video. I will see you there.